everyone, it's Speak Entertainment and we are back again, and here now we have another video for you. And in the lead up to the upcoming Masters of the Universe reboot in June this year, I thought I'd take a look back at the previous live action movie from the 1980s. And when we look at this version here, we go back to the dates of August the 7th, 1987. The movie stars Dolph Lundgren, Frank Langella, Meg Foster and Courtney Cox, and it was directed by Gary Goddard. And as we all know by now, this was indeed the first live-action adaptation of the iconic He-Man and the Masters of the Universe animated series from 1983, a series that impacted so much of us, of a certain generation, including myself, within the 1980s, and we were completely enamoured by this collection of dynamic animated series that were normally screened on Saturday mornings or afternoons, and Masters of the Universe was perhaps the most iconic of them all. The story itself was set in the fantasy world of Eternia, and it would see the iconic warrior hero known as He-Man, accompanied by his friends, battling against the evil forces led by Skeletor, who wants to apprehend the ultimate power that's based within Castle Grayskull. And the movie itself followed this outline very closely to an extent, as in the beginning we see Skeletor and his forces, who have already seized control of Castle Grayskull, holding the Guardian and Sorceress as hostage. Skeletor reveals his plans to completely claim all power of Eternia by the next moonrise. He-Man, alongside Teela and Man-at-Arms, look to combat the threat by rescuing first the locksmith known as Gildor, who has created the device known as the Cosmic Key, which enables teleportation to different worlds. After being hunted down by Skeletor's forces, the heroes try to rescue the Sorceress in Castle Grayskull, but find themselves overpowered. In a last-ditch escape, they use the Cosmic Key to escape to planet Earth. And over there they meet young teenagers, both Julie and Kevin, and they all work together to fend off the pursuit of Skeletor's forces. And all of the events will eventually lead to a final confrontation between He-Man and Skeletor in order to save Eternia. Now, when looking back at this movie, I've always come at it from two perspectives. First, as a fan of the franchise, and even when I watched it for the first time, I've always given it some leeway, as I fully understood that attempting an adaptation such as this was very difficult at the time. To translate it fully and accurately would have required a sizable budget, and this is something that hadn't really been done before. The concept of He-Man, you're not only dealing with medieval and sword and sorcery, we've seen that plenty of times throughout the 1980s, but then you were adding in also the science fiction, more akin to Star Wars. So I understood fully that this would be something difficult to put on the big screen. So you're always going to get some sort of dialing or scaling back in terms of its adaptation. And of course, that's compounded with the fact that the film was produced by the notorious Cannon Group, who were experiencing massive financial troubles within this stage of the 1980s. And they were really just haphazardly churning out movies left, right and centre, both cheap and under budget. So I fully understood the limitations within the film that they were presenting here. And following on from that, we can then look at the more critical perspective, where you really could tear this film apart. Yes, it has that cheap, schlocky feel and tone to it. You don't really get much depth in terms of character, no real insight into the huge mythology of the universe. Indeed, we do get an all too quick introduction of the backstory and world setting before we go straight into the action. The film can be seen as very hokey, a bit cartoonish, and the plot is very simple and straightforward. And all of those arguments are very valid. But if you put aside all of those negatives, the film itself functions well as a fun, action-packed, escapist experience. We quickly establish the villain, the heroes, the MacGuffin, and the stakes that they're involved. And the story just moves along very much at a brisk pace. And when we're rewatching it again recently, it overall does work as an exciting chase narrative. There's no bloat, there's no filler, and that approach absolutely works for this particular story. Again, if you're not concerned with really going into the entire mythology and world building, again, they were limited at the time in terms of resources and budget. And this is where you go back to the perspective of a fan, where you could criticise the much lamented decision to place the story, certainly close to 2/3 of it being on planet Earth, but once more this is down to the budget limitations. Yet ironically, when the movie shifts to Earth, it actually improves and settles down, as the Earth parts of the film are really what carries the most momentum. We get plenty of action set pieces as we see He-Man fending off various of Skeletor's soldiers. We have a very unconvincing sequence where He-Man is flying around in a city on pods, fighting off against the soldiers. But again, it's very action packed, it's exciting to an extent, and it's constantly keeping you engaged, and it's fun to watch. Now, without question, the best element of the movie is Frank Langella as Skeletor, who always was an over the top character, very lively personality. But in this movie here, Langella manages to find a balance between the extrovertedness and the seriousness. All of Skeletor's monologues and speeches adds to his overall presence. And it's a great villain performance, and it's just what you need really for a movie like this. You want the villain to really make an impact and carry a certain verve and personality and presence, and Langella definitely does that in the role here. We talk of Dolph Lundgren, who of course at this point was coming off his own iconic villain performance as Drago in Rocky IV. And I can vividly remember at the time when seeing him in the role as He-Man, logically it made sense, but I almost felt Dolph was perhaps even too big for He-Man if you compare to how he looks in the original animated series. Yet despite all of that, he is absolutely the physical live embodiment of what He-Man should be. I actually do like the costume design that we get in the movie here in terms of his cape. I think that's a cool look for the character. And Lundgren was clearly aware of his acting limitations here, playing it very safe and straight. It's all very well known that the director, Gary Goddard, initially wasn't happy with Lundgren's line delivery initially, and he considered redubbing his voice. But due to contract stipulations, he had to go with the actor's natural vocals, and in the end, it turned out to be suitable enough. If you see throughout the movie, we see a lot of physical activity with He-Man in terms of fighting enemies, but he doesn't get too much dialogue in order to really try and carry the story, and most of this dialogue again is helped by being in the presence of the supporting characters. Meg Foster undeniably carries a cool, steely manner as Evil Lynn, a very calm demeanour but menacing all the same, and yes, she does look quite hot here, carrying a certain sex appeal and attractiveness, as does Chelsea Field also as Tina. So overall, there was a lot to like here in terms of this movie, despite its limitations, which are clearly obvious to see, though sadly that wasn't enough to reflect with audiences at the time, as the movie flopped on its release, only managing to gross around $17.3 million from a $22 million budget, and it was much derided amongst both fans and critics. And this was really signalling again the downturn and death knell in He-Man as a franchise in terms of the toys and the merchandising, which were already seen a certain decline prior to this movie being released. But when we look back at Masters of the Universe, I can say that whilst it may not be the most iconic or indeed the most faithful adaptation of He-Man, I think overall it's again on its own merit a fun, action-packed adventure that you could sit back, and yes, you do have to suspend a lot of disbelief and limitations in terms of the movie, though you do have to remember what they were trying to do at the time here, and also the fact that the fantasy genre itself at this point was really fading out going into the late 1980s. So it's always been a film for me that the concept was there, the initial story was there, but the film was held back by lack of production. We could say the same typically for Highlander as well, though I do believe Masters of the Universe is a superior film to that. So I think overall, judged on a single individual film, Masters of the Universe, whilst may not be the most consummate version of He-Man, it still remains an overall enjoyable watch many years after its overall release. So there's my thoughts and feelings when looking back at the Masters of the Universe movie from 1987. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you have any other further movies, television series, or any other topics from the pop entertainment and culture scene that you'd like to see me cover in this channel, then also let me know in the comments, and I'll see if I can provide further commentary for you on that subject matter within the future. Please also hit like the subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you very soon.